everyone, I'm Larissa Russell of Creative You, and I'm your host of the Creative Soul Healing Podcast. Here's where we talk about the connection between creativity and healing by interviewing amazing creatives, spectacular healers, and inspiring people who have used creativity in their healing. What does it mean to be creative? What is creativity? You don't have to write a best-selling book or paint a masterpiece or even play in a rock band. Creativity is in everything that we do, in the ways we think, in the way we run a business. In our everyday lives, we are creative all the time. Let's talk about how we are creative and how creativity helps us heal mentally, physically, and emotionally, right now on the Creative Soul Healing Podcast. Hi everyone, Larissa Russell of Creative You Healing. Welcome to the Creative Soul Healing Podcast. Today I have with me Blake Farha. Blake is a voice artist, musician, and author, fluent in 4.5 languages. He says his Danish has gotten a bit rusty. Blake has spent his adult life hopping from country to country and jumping from career to career. He currently lives in Berlin, Germany, where he has devoted himself to his creative pursuits, voice acting, writing, and producing music, improv comedy, and podcasting. So welcome, Blake.
Thank you very much.
I'm excited to have you. That's quite a resume, if you will, right?
Well, I mean, I had to write enough to make you think that I was the kind of creative you wanted to have on your podcast. So
okay, that's what it was. So can you share some of your story and the path that's brought you here?
Absolutely. I'll try. It's a long one. So I'll cut it short. Basically, this has all been one giant accident. Where I've landed is a place that I never could have imagined being. But yeah, I mean, since I was a kid, I started playing guitar and writing music when I was 13 years old, like a good angsty teenager. And from there, I mean, it's always been my passion: acting, performing, being on stage. And so my whole life, without really realizing it, I was crafting, a skill set. I always wanted to be a musician. I always wanted to be a rock star. But of course, I was told if you're going to go to college, you have to study something that you can fall back on. So I studied economics, which I don't know. It's funny. I wouldn't say I regret it, but it's definitely something that I think about. Like, wow, I really had no business studying economics. It really did not make any sense. But yeah, so I went to college, I studied economics, and after that, I decided I wanted to travel for as long as I could. So I lived in Spain for a while. I did my last semester of college in Spain. I taught English in South Korea for 18 months. And, I was just kind of hopping around. After South Korea, I then went to France for another 9 months to teach English. And I realized at that point, I was 24 years old. And I realized, oh, if I don't do the music thing now, it'll never happen. So I have to try. So I then went back to the States, completely lost and unsure of what to do, and decided to chase my dreams of being a musician. So I lived in Austin, Texas for about 18 months and burned myself out completely, writing music as much as I could, playing every day. I was constantly at a gig, on a stage, or practicing or playing my guitar at all times. And I just got really burned out. In retrospect, I set some very unrealistic goals for myself. In fact, I set one very unrealistic goal for myself, which was become a rock star. And that apparently was a bad goal. And I know that now, but at the time it made perfect sense. And now I'm like, well, that was unachievable. Hence why I burned myself out and had to bail. And then I moved back to Europe. I came to Berlin as it was kind of a fluke. I met a girl while I was in Austin. We fell in love. I moved to Denmark. We couldn't stay there, so I had to come to Berlin. And that's where I currently live. And it was a complete accident, but one that I'm just so thrilled about. And since I've been here, I spent a little time, I kind of gave up music, gave up creativity, just gave up everything, and thought I'll be happy just working a 9 to 5, doing my job, and then having my vacations, etc. And after 3 years of that, you can imagine I was not happy at all. And I was very unfulfilled. And I was like, what's this thing that's missing, like in my soul? Like, oh yeah, I have to create. It's who I am. It's what I do. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. And so from there, luckily, I lost my job at that startup that I was working at for 3.5 years. And that was one of those gifts the universe gives you, which at the time I knew it and also was very angry about it. I remember thinking like, I'm going to quit this job in a year. I had just gotten a raise and I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to sock away the cash and then I'll quit in a year and I'll figure things out from there. And then not 2 months later, I was laid off, and almost as if the universe was like, let me just save you the year of wasted time, And from there, I did the Camino de Santiago. I walked on the Camino de Santiago, which for anyone who's not familiar, It's an ancient pilgrimage across Spain that goes to Santiago de Compostela, and I think it's quite becoming quite popular, and I think a lot of people are quite familiar with it. And it was as with anyone who walks the Camino, or many people who walk the Camino, I'm lost. I have no idea what to do. I've always wanted to do this. Now I have the time and energy to do it, so I will. And from there, I just knew it was time to completely, change everything. I didn't want to go back to work. I didn't know where to go, but I knew I couldn't go back to teaching English, working in a frozen yogurt shop, working in finance, working as an economist, or in the economic sector, working at a startup, working as a web developer. I just knew all of that. It was in the past and it had to stay there. And when I came back, I fell into improv comedy, and it just completely changed my life. In a way that I could never have anticipated. And it's brought me to where I am today, which is doing voice work and I'm working as a voice artist now full time. I use my voice to tell all kinds of different stories, whether it's for YouTube videos or podcasts. I just recently did my first feature length animation film for a German production company here. And even did my first TV show, I had a small part in a German TV show, which is very exciting. So it's just it's like The Alchemist, that book by Paulo Coelho, where the protagonist is looking for something, and it was there all along. He was, it's right, and he comes full circle, and that's what I feel like my life story has been. It's just been me avoiding the very thing that I wanted until I came right back to it.
Yes, absolutely. And just as you're talking about improv, and improv is all about saying yes, right? So,
Absolutely. Yes, and
so
the and is very important. You have to,
yes.
it's about saying yes and adding to it as well. It's not just saying yes, it's agreeing and adding and bringing something else to the table, something new and exciting to the table as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it's funny, my brother lives in Berlin.
Oh,
He's a
really?
dancer. Yeah. And so I just find it interesting that a lot of creatives end up in Berlin
Mm.
or Germany because they treat their artists very well, right? They do
Yeah,
treat their,
it's definitely easier to be an artist here than I would say in a lot of places. I think there's a lot more support for the arts in general here than there are certainly than what I was able to find back home in the States. And I think that can be a really and not just Germany, Europe in general can be. There's so many government grants, and there's really money for these things. So it's not unusual to find artists who are making a living in Europe as in their art. And I think there's also a different outlook on art here and being an artist. And I think in the States, I always had the feeling of if you're not, people always ask that question, oh, you're a musician, have you made it? And it's like, well, what does that mean? What does make it mean? Because am I a millionaire rock star that you hear on the radio? No. Do I make my living from my art, and do I play music every day, and do I get to live my passion? Yes. If you ask me, that is making it, and I've really had to work hard to shift that mindset, because it wasn't until I came to Europe and started meeting other artists and seeing people how they reacted to my being, a musician or an artist. It wasn't that question, do I know you? Well, then you're not really an artist. It was, oh, you're an artist, you do this, that's art, therefore you're an artist. It's as simple as that, and the recognition of that is something that I didn't get a lot of. I feel like it's not really in the culture of the U.S. It's either you made it or you didn't, and that can be quite bad, quite a bad way to go about things, I think. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. So what does healing with creativity mean to you?
Yeah, so I have struggled my entire life with depression and anxiety, severe depression and anxiety, and it's only in the last, really since the beginning of the pandemic, that things have really started to turn around. And I mean, for me, this is without knowing it. I think for a long time, especially when I was younger, when I was in high school, yeah, I didn't even know what depression was. I didn't know it was a thing, and now, of course, these are things we talk about much more openly. Certainly, I think the younger generations are beginning to finally speak about mental health issues, and it's becoming very normal. But when I was growing up, nobody talked about it. I didn't know anyone who had depression. I knew a lot of people who had depression, but nobody talked about it. Nobody knew they had it, and I didn't either, because nobody talked about it. I just thought that I was a bit sensitive, and without realizing it, that was always why I wrote music. That was always what I wrote music about. I mean, even from the beginning, as a young man, I didn't necessarily write the love songs that you generally kind of write in the singer-songwriter genre, which I was always a part of. My acoustic guitar was always helping me to express what I was going through in my head, and it was very rarely about love. It was much more frequently about those existential crises that you go through. And every time I would be feeling something, going through a phase, I would naturally come to the guitar, and I would naturally strike a note that would just resonate with whatever was going on in my heart, in my soul, in my head at the time, and I would think, oh, that feels really good. That's I don't know. I don't know how to put it, but it's like when I strike that chord or strike that note, I just know that that's what I'm feeling. And that note speaks all the emotions that I can't clarify with words, that I can't, that I just can't quantify verbally. And by the time I'd finish writing the song, a lot of things would happen. First of all, it would give me the chance to express, all those things that I don't know how to put words to, and really feel it. You really feel the music. You physically feel the sound waves as they're vibrating through your body. Secondly, it would take my mind off of things because I'd be so focused on writing and creating the music that it would help to break that loop, that cycle in your head, that destructive rumination that just takes you around and around and around and down the spiral. And so by the time I'd finish the song, I would just feel so much better. And this might take a day, it might take weeks to finish a song, but it's that process that just keeps you coming back and keeps you productive and keeps you feeling something that isn't, for me, that wasn't, it was feeling something that wasn't just my own misery, and it was giving it almost a reason to exist and giving it a voice and letting it out through the music itself. And I think that's what creative healing is for me. It's using creativity to genuinely heal, to truly almost like exorcise the demons, as it were, from inside.
Yeah. And I think that's so true, because when we get into, I call it the flow, when we get into that flow and we can, forget about the other things, but it's also a processing time, right? It allows us to work through whatever it is. So
Absolutely.
I think that's so important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what inspires you in the work that you do?
Obviously, like other artists, doing great work. I think I've been thinking a lot about this actually lately, because it's a funny thing. Sometimes when an artist that I really like creates great work, kind of does two things. One, it kind of sets me to obviously comparing myself to them, which is not healthy, and that's not what you want. But it is a natural thing, I think, and sort of thinking like, well, can I do that? Have I done something like that? And simultaneously, it makes me think, God, that's what I want to do. I just want to create great things. Like when I think about why I get up in the morning and why I like come to my studio and try to write music and do my voice work and do my voice acting, I think a lot of it comes from just the sheer joy of creation. That's really what it is at the end of the day. And when I see an artist who has produced something great, whether it be a beautiful piece of music or a really fantastic film or an excellent novel, all I can think is like that must have been so exciting for them to create. And they've really put something out in the world that has an impact on people, whether it's just for fun and it makes people escape their day for 5 minutes, or whether it truly moves people and makes them consider things and change things in their life. They're both valid. And that's what I always feel like. I want to do the same. I just want to bathe in that process of creating and making and the joy of bringing something beautiful to life and then sharing it with people. And I think more than anything, that inspires me, just knowing it's maybe the sharing, it's the creating and then putting it out there in the world and letting the world interact with it how they want, how they can.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I talk about that with my clients often. It's about the creation part is a separate from the sharing part. And
Totally.
that sharing is like this extra oomph to what you do, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important. And you don't have to share everything.
No.
But sharing that sort of what you're proud of, and I know you have a book I think you're proud of. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I can tell you about that. Yeah, so when I went on the Camino de Santiago, it was on the back of some pretty intense therapy that I was going through at the time. It was my second time back in therapy, and I had made, some progress and was feeling pretty good. And then I lost this job, and my therapist and I decided that, it would be really useful to journal while I was on the Camino to really help process those thoughts. And of course, like I ruminate, I think so many people who suffer from depression and anxiety, I ruminate. My brain just gets stuck in loops that I can't get myself out of. And there's a lot of research that shows how powerful journaling can be to act as a new filter for those thoughts, so that now you're actually thinking differently about them than you would if you just kept them in your head. You're putting them through a different filter, and that allows you to process them better or in a different way. So I did this, and I kept a journal the entire Camino, and for think it took me 29 days to complete the Camino, the first stretch of the Camino. And for 33 days, I was on the Camino. So I was journaling every single day. And when I got back from the Camino, when I finished, I was in Coimbra, Portugal, and I was just sitting back in this like sort of hostel, just trying to process the entire, experience, which, as you can imagine, is a lot to process. And I was reading back over my journal, and I realized that what I had written was really, I felt like there were a lot of lessons that the Camino had given me, and but that I learned along the way. And I thought, there are a lot of people who would benefit from these lessons, who don't have the time, the money, the energy, who, for whatever reason, will not be able to go on the Camino, but would enjoy and would learn something from the experience that I had. So I decided to publish my journal, and I published the journal itself completely unedited, completely raw, um, because I thought, if I learned anything on the Camino, if there's anything to be gained from my experience, it's the raw, uncensored nature of it. It's the true experience that I had. That's the thing that is that imparts the lesson. If I were to go through and edit it, it would lose that, because now it's a voice that I'm trying to create. And because I never intended to publish it, it really truly is like my genuine thoughts. I was really strict, and I told myself I would write whatever was actually going through my head, whatever I was actually feeling at the time, whatever I was actually experiencing, because otherwise it wouldn't serve me at all. And so what I published is that journal, and it's that raw experience of my 33 days on the Camino. And every chapter is one of the days on the Camino. And it talks about everything from the countryside, the scenery that I was going through, or the horrendous industrial wastelands that I was going through, because there are those as well on the Camino. It's not all beautiful. The people I was meeting, the things that I was experiencing, what was going on in my head. And so this is the book that I published, and there's a forward and an afterward that I added to the book. The forward to kind of give context to the journal itself, and the afterward to let the reader know what then took place, because I think a lot of us want these happy ending stories. I think a lot of us want to believe that there's a thing like the Camino out there, that you can just do it and you're fixed and you're done and you don't have to worry anymore and it's all over. And that was not the case at all. And I don't think it's the case for anyone, or I think it's very rare if it is the case. And so the afterword, it took me 2 years to finally finish publishing the book, 3 years actually. And so the afterword was written about those 2 years. What happened after I came back from the Camino? What were the things that took place in my life? And what did I actually learn from that experience? And how, what path did I take after I got back? Because when I was back, it wasn't long before I was back into depression, back into all the same cycles. And before I wound up publishing the book, before the publish was actually finished, I was in the hospital. I was hospitalized, where I checked myself into a psychiatric ward for the depression that I was going through. So it's not all rainbows and sunshine. And I think it's important to understand that these experiences that we have in our life, and they don't always have that Hollywood movie feel to them. And I don't think that that means that they're less valuable. I just think it means we need to contextualize and understand what are the things to be gained from these experiences, because they're not gonna solve your problems for you, but they can help you get the perspective you need to begin solving those problems. And that's really what I think it's all about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's so true. Like, we think there's going to be a fix, right?
Mm.
And we're always looking for that quick cure, that quick fix, and we just want to be done with it. And it's a lot of work. You just keep taking away layer by layer.
Mm.
And I think when you're done here, right? Like, that's our life
Yeah.
process, right?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like,
Absolutely.
so don't look for the quick fix. Let's just, layer by layer, get through, keep working on it, and have a long life.
That's exactly it. I mean, there is no silver bullet. There is no quick fix. And I think that unfortunately a lot of things are being marketed as that, and I think the Camino, as it becomes more and more well known, and becomes there are movies about it now, and there's a lot of people who have written about their experiences. I do think it's being marketed as that, as this sort of silver bullet. You can just go on the Camino, do 30 days of walking, and you'll come back a new person. And that's ridiculous. I mean, I think it's really dangerous to send a message like that, because it gives people false hope, and people do go with false expectations and unrealistic expectations. And I don't think that that's how we can serve ourselves best. As you say, it's a process, and everything is it takes time, and you'll come back from the Camino, for example, and the Camino is just one example of one of these sort of life-changing experiences, in quotation marks, that people go on to try to solve these problems. And it was like 2 years later, and I'm still like unpacking things from the Camino, things that I experienced, and like, oh, that's the lesson to be learned. It isn't immediate. It takes a lot of time, even for those one singular experiences to to give their answers, or to blossom in a way that you can actually make sense of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what we have to remember. It is a process, and it is about peeling back those layers. And as you said, it doesn't really end. You're never done. You're never done.
Let's hope not. Just keep going. Just keep going. So, what with all the things that you've done and all the travel and all the amazing accomplishments, what would you say you're the proudest of in your life?
I would say accomplishing the Camino accomplishing. Let me rephrase that. There is no like doing the Camino de Santiago, right? Some people do it for 3 days, they just go for a few days of hiking. There is no. I think it's important to remember it's not like a thing you achieve. But I did want to walk from where I started to Santiago de Compostela. That was my hope, and I achieved that. And I felt really, really proud of that. And I still do. It was something I was really afraid I would be unable to do. In classic Blake fashion, my brain was telling me, you won't be able to do this. It's just not possible. And I talk a lot about that in the book. In the days before I went on the Camino, I began the journal to help put myself in the mindset of, why am I doing this? Why am I writing this journal? What is this all about for me? And the fear in that is so palpable to me. It's so visible. I mean, I write about it a lot. I was terrified that I would be somehow unable, that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't strong enough or healthy enough. So when I did manage to reach Santiago de Compostela, and I mean, it was a beautiful moment. But one that was full of its own lessons for lots of reasons. I think often these like climax moments, you go, oh, is this it? This wasn't what I was expecting. I thought it would feel better, but that was one of the things I was proudest of, certainly. And yeah, I recently was cast as a character in an animated film that's being produced. That was a very proud moment for me, for sure, because there was a moment where I was in the recording booth, and I was like working with the director, and I realized, like, this is it, like, and it comes back full circle, actually, to this conversation we were having earlier, like, what is making it, right? Because does anyone know who I am? No. Am I famous? Absolutely not. Will I ever be? Almost certainly not. um but when I was in that room with them, and of course, like, that's what my brain always wants, right? Like, that's what I always was shooting for, as a young teenager. That was it. Like, I'm gonna make it. That's the whole dream, is to make it. And I was in that studio, and there was a moment where I was like, do not let this be lost on you. You have made it. You know what I mean? Not because you're famous now. You've made it because you're living your dream, and your dream is to perform, and you're being paid to perform, and to create this character and to bring it to life. And when I really let that sink in, I was like, man, this is it. Like, I've made it exactly where I wanted to make it. I'm living exactly the kind of life, more or less, with some tweaks that are still going. As we said, it's never over. That I wanted to live since I was a young man, and that I got very, very far away from for a very long time.
Yeah. And I think that's so common for creatives, that we do get far away from what we want or need,
Mm,
because it's not mainstream. It's not what's expected of us. And so, I don't know, take the path, that's already there for us, and instead of creating our own path, I think, and creatives. And when you can do that, then you can sort of settle into yourself and be like, this is what I needed. This is where I was
absolutely.
supposed to be. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So if you could change one aspect of our society through your work, what would that be?
Wow, that's a big question. Let's think. Give me one moment to ponder that. I don't know if I have a good answer for this, but I can say something that I'm constantly trying to relearn, and something that it's hard, right? Because it's so complicated. We don't live in a world where everyone is living the same experience. And it depends on where you come from, and the message that I would have maybe would only be really would only make sense from a very, like, sort of privileged place. I'm not really sure, but certainly from my experience and what I've lived, I I was I grew up in a world, or at least in a society, that told me that it's all about money. It's all about making money, and you got to make money. And I understand a lot of why that is. I mean, it was certainly a message that I got a lot, not just from family, but from teachers. And they don't tell you it's all about money, but again, that whole message of be sure you can go a degree you can fall back on, and blah 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 blah. I would love to change that, man. Life is so short, and we are all going to die, and much sooner than we want to for most of us. Like whether it's in 2 days or in 100 years, when that day comes, you'll probably wish you had a little more time. And we spend so much time being worried and being afraid and wanting to make sure that we have enough. And I think I don't really know how to like articulate it, but you've got to enjoy it. You've got to enjoy this experience. We don't know. Maybe there's only one life. Maybe there's a million. Who knows? But like, I think the best information we have to go on is argues we got one chance at this. You get one go. And if you're chasing money and you're chasing material wealth and you're chasing that stuff, it's not a very interesting message, I guess, is what I'm learning as I'm as I'm articulating this. But man, just like relax, take it easy, and do what feels good. Do what feels good to you. And if it doesn't feel good, stop doing it. Like as soon as you can make a switch to something that does feel good, do that, because what's the point otherwise? What's the point? Yeah.
It's so true. We have a 17-year-old niece. She's like brilliant in school and all of that. And I offered her a job recently, and she's doing some videos and things for me. And her dad said to her, "That's not a real job." And it's like, you're doing work, you're getting paid, and you don't have to go out. And it's like, how is that not a real job exactly?
Yeah.
But you need to be out there in the world, in a cubicle,
But it's crazy because I exactly as you say. I still struggle with this, and I still struggle to understand that like I'm not living the life that I thought I was supposed to, and that's a good thing. You know what I mean? That's a good thing. Sometimes I wake up and the day that I have, I'll be like, oh, I don't know if I'm really doing very well. But like the reality is, I'm making more money than I've ever made in my entire life. I work half the time that I used to work. I'm working right for things that earn me money, 20 hours a week to 30 hours a week, maybe. And the rest of the time I spend doing the things that I love, playing music, writing music that maybe no one's going to hear. Maybe no one's ever going to pay me a dime for it. But like, and I feel guilty. I feel guilty. Like I'm not working enough. Like I'm not doing the right things. And then I have to stop and be like, no, you're not doing those things because you didn't want to do them. This is the life you wanted for yourself. And I think that's what's so insidious about it, is it's so ingrained in us that when we get there, when we start living that life that we wanted, whatever that might be, sometimes it still doesn't feel right. I still feel guilty. I think a lot of artists and creatives and just people who are trying to, who don't fit in that box they were given, they feel that guilt. They feel that oh, am I being an adult? Am I doing it right? And it's like, man, forget all of that. Like, what does it mean to be an adult? If you can work 20 hours a week, work 20 hours a week or less. And if you can find a way to pay all your bills and play music and have fun with your friends and like pursue things that excite you, great. That's the goal. That's the goal.
Mm-hmm. And it's so true. But that guilt, because, culturally, societally, we're taught that, work harder. And it's like, do we have to?
Exactly. Do we have to? And the answer is no. And maybe this is like, yeah, I just got back. Actually, this week is the first week back. I've been away from work or from the studio for 5 weeks, and I've been traveling around, just visiting some friends in Europe and trying to get some sunshine to no avail. And it's been amazing. And there were so many times throughout that trip that I had to like stop myself because I could feel the anxiety bubbling up. And oh, should I be away from the desk? And should I be away from my work? And shouldn't I be like back on the grind and getting my, emailing people and getting my voice out there and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, no, dude, like you can take a month off. This is amazing. What a life you've built for yourself. Like, try to enjoy it, but it's amazing. Like I've been working for that moment for really my whole life, and I finally arrived at this place where my life kind of is how I can arrange it how I like. I had the immense privilege of being like, wow, I told all my clients I'm leaving, I'm not coming back for a month, I'll see you when I'm back, and they're all waiting for me when I get back, much to my dismay. But like life does go on. It's not that critical. You can take a month off, and like I'm back, I feel refreshed, I feel excited, I feel inspired, and I'm just ready to go. And yeah, and still today I woke up at about 9 o'clock, and I like read my book for an hour while I was drinking coffee, and I got to the studio at about noon, and I'm like, I did a little bit of voice work and sent in an audition tape and did some work for a client and talked to an immigration lawyer. I mean, but it's now what, 6 o'clock, and I'm like, okay, that's my I'm good. Like, I'm done for today. And there's that part of my brain that wants to be like, oh, that wasn't enough, you should work harder. And there's that other part that's like, dude, you've ticked all the adult boxes and you've found a way to do it with extra time to spare. Awesome.
I think that is a brilliant lesson that if we could just teach people that, right? Because I struggle with it as well. I work for myself, and whenever I'm not like at my desk, or I'm like, oh, I should be working, and it's like, why? All the work is done that needs to be done today.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it. This is
It's
the
so
importance.
true.
This is the importance I've found, certainly for anyone who's out there freelancing and working for themselves, like making some lists, because I think that it's always easy to put in 5 more minutes. But if you can come up with a list of things, you're like, this is what needs to be accomplished today. And when I tick that last box, if it happens in an hour or in 6 hours, I'm good. I'm done for the day. And it also motivates you. You're like, wow, so if I finish this in 3 hours, I can be done for the day and then play my piano all day long. Like, that's great. And then you do it and you're like, cool. And you can come back to that. And when your brain starts going, you should be working more, like, nope, no. I ticked all the boxes. I've done it. Today is good. Now I can enjoy the rest of it.
I love that. I love that. All right. That's going to be our messaging for people from here forward. Tick those boxes and be done with your day.
Exactly. Because isn't that the problem with like the 9 to 5, is that it doesn't, that was one of the problems I experienced, and certainly one I hear a lot about. It's like, my job requires 3 hours of my time a day, and yet I have to be there for 8. So what is that about? You know what I mean? And we want to get away from that. It's just inefficient. As an economist, I think it's a ridiculous thing to do.
And that is so true. How much time do you waste when you're in a work environment like that, in the cubicles, because you have to get away from your desk, and so you go and chat to somebody, or you go get coffee, or you do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I could just do my job and leave, I would be out of here, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I know that these are supposed to be rather short conversations, and I don't want to go over your time, but I did actually, as we're talking, had a thought that maybe this is a more interesting thing that I'd like to, more than like, don't follow money. Has no one ever said that before? Something that, and it goes back to what you're talking about. You don't have to share everything you create. And this is actually something that I've been practicing recently, because I realized, let me start here. Create for the sake of creation. That's maybe a message I would love to give people, not for an audience. And again, I mean, my whole life, anytime that I thought, okay, I'm done with music because I'm not going to make it, quote unquote, as soon as I realized I wasn't going to make it, then I wanted to stop making music, and I wanted to stop playing music, because I thought, what's the point? If no one's going to pay me for it, what's the point? And now I'm 34 years old, and I've come back to this point in my life where I'm creating music again. I'm releasing music again. And I realized for so long, I didn't like the creative process because I was worried about what people were going to think of what I was creating. I was creating for an audience. And I think that there's a time and a place for that, of course. If that's what you're trying to do, like make money from your art, really, then I suppose you have to consider that to some degree. But if you don't think about it, just create. And so recently I've been creating music and releasing music without telling anyone about it, not like sharing it with my friends. I'm creating it, I'm recording it, and I'm publishing it, and I'm putting it out in the world quietly under the radar. Publishing it gives me a reason to create, but doing it and not telling anyone about it, I'm not worried about what anyone thinks anymore. And now I'm being so much more experimental with the things that I'm doing. And I've rediscovered the joy of creating and the healing power that it does have, and the joy that it brings my day-to-day life, because that's the point, right? Like, you shouldn't create something because someone's going to pay you for it. Or that's one reason to create something. Another reason is because when you play piano or make paper mache, or I don't know, bake a cake, it just fills you up with joy and excitement. And now that when I'm creating from without a desire to when I'm not creating thinking about money or trying to appease someone, suddenly I've rediscovered that joy and that beautiful moment of oneness with the universe when you're creating stuff. And so maybe that would be a message: create for the sake of it, because that's what it's all about, really.
It really is. And I know I got caught up early in my art career in, doing custom work and things for people. And then you're trying to make it work. And it just ruined it for me. It ruined it for me. And I didn't think the art was good. And so I had to go back to like, no more custom work. You either like it or you don't.
Yeah.
And, some pieces I put out there, some pieces I don't create just to sell. In fact, I don't even have anything out there right now. I still create. And one day I'll put it back out there maybe, but I just need to create. And if people ask me, I'll show them and, maybe sell them a piece, but I don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I just need to create. Yeah, it's so important. So important. So do you have an inspirational quote or a motto that you live by, either life or this week? Or
I suppose many. There's one that I come back to a lot, and it was one that I reference in my book a lot, because it was the motto that kind of got me through the Camino. And I'm trying to think who actually wrote the quote, and I misquoted it in my book. I had to write the one the one footnote is about that. Yes, William Wordsworth, who said, "The road is life." And I'm sure a lot of people have heard this quote before, but I'd been reading it my whole life, and I'd heard it or I'd seen it in places, and it didn't really mean much to me until right before I went to the Camino. I was thinking about it, and I realized I was kind of reading it wrong. And what I came to realize that the quote means is, the road itself, that's life. It's I suppose it's just another take on the journey is the destination, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've all heard it a million times, but I don't know how many of us hear it and actually live by it. You know what I mean? And I think we take it for granted. It's kind of this trope, this cliche that we just hear over and over, but it doesn't stop being true, and it doesn't stop being almost impossible to live by in this day and age. So yeah, that's, when I get lost and when I get confused and when I let the anxiety get control and when I start losing sight of things, I try to remind myself, the road is life. This is it. The thing you're doing right now, this is living, this moment. It's not you're not living when you make it, you're living in the process of getting to the place where you've made it, whether that's being a millionaire and a rock star or just getting to do a silly bird voice for a small animation film, that's life. That's maybe what I try to live by.
Oh, I love that. I love that a lot. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we maybe haven't discussed today?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, one tiny thing. You're asking me if there's something that I live by. Maybe another thing, something that I say a lot is there is no should. There is no should. And you hear it a lot. I used to say it a lot. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I should, no, 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 no. And I should have a real job where I work in a cubicle or something. And there is no should. There's no right way to live life. There's no good or bad. It just is. We're just here. It's a crazy mistake that we're all just here. And when we have this idea of, oh, I should do something, the question isn't should you or shouldn't you. I think the question is, do you want to or do you not want to? And when I hear myself saying, oh, I should this, I should, I don't know, work harder, then I ask myself, okay, no, do you want to work harder or do you not want to work harder? And the answer to that question is a much more powerful force, because should seeks only to make you feel guilty about what you are or are not doing. Whereas if you ask yourself, do I want to or do I not want to? You go, oh, I don't want to work harder. Okay, well then don't worry about it anymore. You're done. Don't work harder. Go home now. and I think this is true of everything. So I would recommend for everyone, try to remove that word should from your vocabulary if you can. And when you find yourself saying should, ask yourself, do I want or do I not want? And see if that can maybe be a bit more productive than just the guilt that you feel when you should be doing something that you're obviously not doing.
I love that. I do. I love that. I'm always telling clients to stop shitting on themselves, right? But just asking those questions, do I want to or do I not want to? So yeah, I think that's a really good way to reframe it.
It's done wonders for me, to be honest. And I mean, I was raised Catholic, so guilt is kind of built into the whole architecture of my being, and so having to find a way out of it and realizing that should was a big part of it, that's been very helpful for me.
We won't even get into that one, but
there's plenty to unpack there. That's for another day.
That's for another day. I want to thank you so much for being here today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, as have I. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Yes. And for our listeners, we will see you again next week. And in the meantime, I wish for you amazingly creative days.
Are you a daily journaler? Do you want more creativity in your day? We have 2 great creativity journals to start your day with. One for people who already have a journaling practice, and one for people who are new to journaling. Both are an amazing way to start your day. Both make the perfect gift for a person in your life. Check out Have an Amazingly Creative Day and How Do I Have an Amazingly Creative Day? Both currently available on Amazon. Click the link below to purchase yours now.